You didn't lose them the way it feels, and they didn't lose interest the way it looks. Something changed first, but it never showed up as a clear moment because, at the beginning, everything felt normal. Messages came in, replies happened. The connection looked the same. Nothing obvious broke, but underneath that surface, something was already shifting. And most people miss this part completely because they're looking for a moment. But attraction doesn't end in a moment. It ends in a pattern. At first, there was uncertainty, not confusion, not chaos, just enough unpredictability to keep attention active. They didn't know exactly when you'd reply. They didn't know exactly how you'd respond. They didn't know how available you were at any moment. And that uncertainty kept their attention engaged. There was space, and space creates interpretation. And interpretation, but slowly, you started removing that space. Not all at once, gradually, without noticing. You replied faster. You explained more. You filled pauses that used to exist naturally. And at the time, it felt like effort, like consistency, like you were doing the right thing. But here's the shift most people never see coming. Consistency without contrast removes curiosity. And when curiosity drops, attention changes direction. Not instantly, but quietly. At first, everything still feels the same. But then small things change. Replies feel slightly delayed. Energy feels slightly different. And this is where most people panic. They assume something broke, so they try to fix it. They message more. They explain more. They try to restore what used to feel natural. But that reaction actually speeds up the problem, because now everything becomes even more predictable. No space, no tension, no uncertainty. And without those three things, there is nothing pulling attention forward. Attraction doesn't survive on constant availability. It survives on rhythm. Close, then slightly distant. Clear, then slightly uncertain. Present, then slightly absent. That rhythm keeps the mind engaged, because the mind stays active when it has to interpret. But when everything becomes fully predictable, the mind stops interpreting. And when interpretation stops, attention fades. Not because something went wrong, but because nothing is unknown anymore. Now here's where things usually shift. At some point, you change your behavior slightly. Maybe you reply later once, and something interesting happens. They notice. Not consciously, but emotionally. The rhythm they were used to breaks, and when rhythm breaks, attention returns. Because the brain reacts to change faster than consistency. They start checking more, thinking more, rereading things more than usual. Not because you did more, but because you did less in a different way. You stopped reinforcing predictability. And that creates space again, and that space reactivates curiosity. But here's the deeper layer. You don't lose attraction in one moment. You lose it through repetition. Same timing, same responses, same emotional pattern. Over and over again, individually, nothing looks important but together. It creates full predictability, and when someone becomes fully predictable, they become mentally filtered, not ignored, just no longer prioritized. Because the brain always shifts attention toward uncertainty. So when people say they lost interest, what they're usually describing is completion. Everything became understood. Everything became expected. Nothing required interpretation anymore. Now here's the important part. This is reversible, but not through effort, not through chasing. It reverses through space. Space is not silence. Space is not ignoring. Space is simply not overfilling every moment, because space brings interpretation back, and interpretation brings attention back. People start thinking again, not because you changed who you are, but because they can no longer fully predict you. And unpredictability is what resets attention, not manipulation, just natural psychological structure. Because attention is not built for certainty, it is built for contrast. So when everything becomes too stable, it slowly disconnects, and when things regain variation, it reconnects. That's why distance often feels sudden. But it isn't. And once you see that pattern clearly, you stop reacting emotionally to every shift, because you understand what's actually happening. Not rejection, not loss, just predictability replacing curiosity. And anything that removes curiosity removes attention until something changes again.